Governor Rockefeller was a man unlike any other. A war hero, father, and politician, he broke barriers many had thought to be unbreakable. Governor Rockefeller broke barriers in politics by becoming the first Republican governor in Arkansas since Reconstruction, bringing industry back to Arkansas, promoting racial equality, and establishing major prison reforms. Born on May 1, 1912 in New York, Winthrop was the fifth child of John D. Rockefeller Jr., the son of oil-rich John D. Rockefeller. Born into wealth, he attended Lincoln School at Columbia Teachers Community College, until he left for Yale in 1931. Leaving after his third year with no degree in 1934, Winthrop left behind an offer in his family's oil empire.
Went to work in Texas for an oil company that his family owned. And he could have probably gotten a job as a supervisor or vice president of some company and sat in an office all day, but he went down there initially under a pseudonym. He didn't want to be known as a Rockefeller, and he took one of the lowest jobs that you could have. He worked as a roustabout and a roughneck in the oil fields, and he was committed to making sure he was treated the same way that all the other men who were working in the oil fields were treated. There was one story of when he was working in Texas, there were both white men and black men who were working for this oil company, and they had segregated lunch breaks. And it was in summertime, Texas heat, blistering, and they had set up tents to provide some shade. And the white workers were allowed to eat in the tents to get out of the heat and in the shade, but the black workers were made to sit outside. Well, Rockefeller couldn't stand that, and in protest, he went and sat with the black workers, and he said, if we're not all going to be treated the same, I'm not going to enjoy, any kind of luxuries.
As war started in Europe, Winthrop continued to lead a different lifestyle than any of his siblings. After attending Businessmen's Training Camp in Plattsburgh, New York, Winthrop enlisted as a private in the United States Army on January 22, 1941. Winthrop completed officer school as a second lieutenant and served as a machine gun instructor at Fort Bennings in Georgia. In December, he was promoted to captain and major in November 1943. Stationed in Paris, the Pacific, and around the globe, Winthrop Rockefeller had an exciting World War II career. In 1944, he participated in campaigns in Guam and Leyte, but in 1945, his ship, the USS Henrico, was hit by a Japanese kamikaze pilot on his way to Okinawa, leaving him the only surviving officer on board. Suffering flash burns on his hands and face, he was sent back to Guam for recovery. Attacked with hepatitis only a few months later, he was sent back to Rockefeller Institute Hospital, New York, for many months. While there, it became evident that Winthrop wouldn't be able to return to active duty, so after he had recovered, Winthrop encouraged the Department of War to conduct a report on how veterans transitioned back into everyday life. Once the report was finished, he was discharged a lieutenant colonel, having received the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster and the Purple Heart. In 1951, he left the oil business, joining the International Basic Economy Corporation, a company formed by his brother Nelson to focus on private investments in developing nations. Serving as chair of the Housing Corporation, which helped create more than 9,000 homes in Puerto Rico by 1954.
So that's what he did. He moved to Arkansas, and he was living around Little Rock, and he had someone show him Petit Jean Mountain, and there was a land ownership available with this view. It was like he lived in the clouds and looked all across Arkansas. That was somewhere around the early 1950s, and by 1955 he was on Petit Jean Mountain and building a house and his cattle ranch and his other businesses.
The second Winthrop set foot on Mount Petit Jean, he had plans. Investing his wealth in the community, he created a model school system in Morrilton, one that would serve as an example for the nation. He donated a collection of automobiles, establishing a museum that many Arkansans still enjoy. While hindered by the local population's lack of morale for higher taxes, he broke that barrier with ease. He established a clinic in Perry County and championed the arts, opening the Arkansas Art Center, and brought art to thousands with their Artmobile exhibit on wheels. Arkansas in 1955 was no perfect place. Arkansas's population was declining, and Democratic Governor Faubus was desperate to bring industry back to Arkansas. He created the Arkansas Industrial Development Commission, or AIDC for short. Even though Winthrop and Faubus disagreed politically, Governor Faubus appointed Winthrop as head of the commission, and he tackled the challenge with great success, bringing more than 600 plants and 90,000 jobs to the state. What Winthrop soon experienced was what political scientist V.O. Key meant when he labeled Arkansas as the purest, one-party Democratic stronghold in the South. While Winthrop went along with bipartisan projects, he drew the line when Faubus did the unthinkable, calling in the National Guard to prevent desegregation. Winthrop was a Northern Republican, advocate for racial equality, and a trustee of the National Urban League. Faubus was everything Rockefeller was against. Rumors spread about a new political rivalry, and Rockefeller didn't dismiss them. He fueled the fire by having a party for two parties to kickstart the Republican Party in the state. Resigning from the AIDC in early 1964, Rockefeller announced his official candidacy for governor of Arkansas. While Faubus, the Democratic governor for 6 consecutive terms, won, Winthrop received more votes than any other Republican candidate in the past. In 1966, Faubus announced he would not be running for governor, which left the election wide open. Democrats nominated Supreme Court Justice James D. Johnson, a leading segregationist and former head of the White Citizens Council. Winthrop represented the Republicans and won in a close victory, becoming the first Republican governor in Arkansas since 1873.
This is a momentous day in my life, and possibly it's a momentous day in the history of Arkansas. It has been widely noted that not for more than 100 years has a member of the Arkansas Republican Party addressed his fellow citizens as governor. I hope that it will not be another 100 years.
Rockefeller's first term as governor was full of barriers. Having only 3 of the 135 seats in the Arkansas General Assembly being held by Republicans, he had a constant struggle to pass anything on his agenda. He adopted the state's first minimum wage, tightened lax insurance regulations, and ordered the illegal gambling in Hot Springs stopped. He broke barriers of racial equality by desegregating many government offices for the first time. He also was the only Southern governor to hold a memorial for Martin Luther King Jr. He reformed Arkansas's prisons, and as his last act, he commuted the sentences of all men on death row to life in prison.
Legislatively, many would say is the Freedom of Information Act, in which a citizen like yourself could seek to get information from a state board, a commission, elected office, and they have to provide it to you. Previously, government was shut out from the average citizen. There was not any transparency in government. So the Freedom of Information Act was likely his greatest legislative achievement.
In 1968, the political scene in Arkansas had little explanation, with 3 unique parties represented. Winthrop was re-elected governor, a Democrat was elected to the U.S. Senate, and an independent won the presidential nomination. Rockefeller's second term as governor was filled with little success, accomplishing little under his Arkansas's Worth Paying For campaign. Arkansas soon realized Winthrop had a troubled personal life. In 1970, he lost the election in a landslide to Democrat Dale Bumpers. Hurt by his defeat, Winthrop retreated into private life, and later divorced his wife Jeanette in 1970. Dying of pancreatic cancer on February 23, 1973, Winthrop Rockefeller left a legacy of barriers broken. He broke political barriers by being elected in a historically democratic state. He continued to break barriers while in office, from prison reform to desegregating government offices, passing the Freedom of Information Act and adopting a state minimum wage. Winthrop led way for progressive Democrats like Governor Dale Bumpers, who adopted much of Rockefeller's policies, and Bill Clinton, who later became the 42nd President of the United States. On top of politics, he was an advocate for youth aviation and the preservation of colonial Williamsburg. He served in World War II, helping defeat the Japanese in campaigns in Guam, Leyte, and Okinawa. Without him, Arkansas wouldn't be the place it is today. 23 years later, his son, Win Paul Rockefeller, would become the 13th Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas, continuing his father's legacy.